I'm super excited to be with you this afternoon. My name is Fallon Ukpe. I'm a physician by background. I've also spent some time in the venture capital industry. I'm an entrepreneur and a speaker and a writer. And today I'm excited to talk about life as a squiggly line. That'll be the name of the talk today. And it's also the title of my book that came out last fall. So I want to spend some time talking today and share a bit about my background and why I get so excited about the squiggly line, and then talk a bit about how life is a squiggly line. And it's not just a straight line that takes you from path A to point B, from point A to point B, and spend some time thinking about how you own that adventure and how you own your squiggly line. So I'll give you a bit of background about myself. So as a kid, starting at the age of 7, I knew I wanted to be a doctor. I really, really wanted to help people. I grew up in Houston, Texas, and for anybody who would ask me for years, that was all that I was focused on. And as I started to go to school and went to college at Johns Hopkins and wound up going to graduate school at Duke, but at Johns Hopkins, I started to understand a bit more about the healthcare industry and the fact that the people who were in charge of hospitals or insurance organizations, they all understood business, because while healthcare was meant to take care of people, at the end of the day, a lot of these people had to run those organizations like businesses because that's what they were. And when I saw that and understood that, to me, it meant that if I wanted to have an impact and really help people and help patients and change healthcare, I needed to understand business. And so that's why I decided to get a business degree, an MBA, in addition to getting a medical degree. So I went to Duke for medical school. I also got an MBA while I was there. I learned a lot about the investment industry, venture capital and private equity especially. And I got very excited about thinking about how to use my business degree and business skills and how to be an investor that could make an impact in different sectors, especially healthcare. And I also wanted to think about how I could take that skill set and help different types of healthcare organizations, not only in the US, but around the world. And so I was finishing at Duke, I decided to go to McKinsey, actually, instead of practicing medicine, which was a big shift and a big decision. And I'd say that was probably one of the biggest and most poignant parts where my life turned into a squiggly line. It wasn't just the straight path that I had planned, and it had this really, really huge detour, but what was the start of quite an amazing one. So from there, I spent time at McKinsey and really learned and grew a lot. I served a lot of organizations in the US that were healthcare companies, hospital systems, other types of companies. I spent some time doing some global work as well. So I spent some time in Africa and Europe. And then I also spent some time working with private equity funds. So helping them identify companies that they would want to invest in and figure out the best way to make investments in them. And a few years ago, I really wanted to jump more into investing. So that's when I decided that it's time to leave McKinsey and figure out how to be more engaged and involved in the venture capital and private equity industry. And so I spent the last few years doing exactly that, which has been quite a phenomenal and really interesting adventure. And so I say all that because for where I am now, so a person who has always wanted to be a doctor, I am a physician who has spent several years as a consultant and who wrote a book that was a #1 Amazon bestseller, and it was published last year, and who spent a ton of time speaking in the past couple of years. I've certainly taken this pathway and approach to life that has not been a straight line, but it's one that I've loved. And it hasn't always been easy, but I think the part that actually made it tough were some of the parts where I was growing the most, so where I needed to learn, and we all have to learn and grow, but also where I was figuring out and better understanding myself and who I am, and the types of talents and the skills that I have, and how I really want to use them in the world and in what I do every day. So, if you think about life, I talk about it as a squiggly line. You could even think about it as art. So your life and how you plan for life and how you envision your life, it's probably a bit like how you would envision a painting or any other type of artistic work that you seek to create, even a book or a script for a movie or even a television show. you're going to start and you're going to have one thing in mind, but that vision or that plan that you have will evolve. Naturally, it will evolve because as you start to write or as you start to draw or paint, or as you start to just live life and have experiences, you're going to learn things, you're going to see things, and you're going to figure out ways that that optimize what you're doing, that are better strategies for what you're doing, or ways that make that piece of art really come to life in a different way that you couldn't have imagined when you were just starting and you just had an idea. So life is a squiggly line, and life is an art piece, and it is what you make it at the end of the day. And so I think it's really, really important to understand that. And so if I could think about things that I think are important, and some things that I've learned along the way, along my squiggly line, I wanted to take a few things from my book and share those things with you all. And so one of those things is just about fear and understanding and navigating fear. And I start with fear, especially with where we are today, in the middle of what is a global pandemic. And when I talk to a lot of people, that's one of the overwhelming feelings and sentiments that I'm picking up. And in the book, I talk about fear, and I talk about how there's a good and a bad side to fear. And that's whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or you're deciding what next step you want to take in your career. And the reality is that fear can serve a purpose. So we've all heard of fight or flight, and that is our body's innate response that helps us understand when we're in trouble, and it tells us, hey, you should start running because that lion probably thinks you're its lunch, and that can be a protective fear that's important. But there's another type of fear where it can have a bad side, and that fear can prevent you from doing things because it can paralyze you from making certain decisions or taking actions because you're so afraid. And I think it is really important, especially when the unexpected happens or things happen that are beyond our control, to really understand, okay, what am I feeling, and identify where the fear is and why you're afraid of whatever it is. So maybe it's a new course that you want to take, or maybe it's a job or an internship that you want to try, but you're afraid. And you're afraid because maybe you've never done it before, or you're not so sure you'll be good at it, or any of those things. It's important to understand what's driving that fear. And then for the fear that isn't being protective, the fear that's holding you back or paralyzing you from taking that next step, it's important to just look at it head on. So it's important to call it out for what it is and figure out, how do you mitigate that, or how do you create a strategy that makes it so that fear doesn't prevent you from doing things or taking that next step. And so for me personally, I have definitely struggled with fear at certain points. And one of the biggest points where I struggled with it was when I was making the decision to go from medical school into consulting at McKinsey instead of practicing. I was really scared because that wasn't my plan. That wasn't what I wanted to do all along, but it had come up as something that I was interested in and I was excited about, but I was afraid because I didn't know how it was going to go. And I had just spent all this time in school learning to be a physician. I wasn't sure exactly how to be a consultant. And I had to work through that a lot. And I was really fortunate to have great community, so great mentors and friends that I could talk to about the decision that I made, I was thinking about and making. And even as I made the decision, I made sure to keep talking to people and getting good advice so that I could keep going. And so I think it's incredibly important to understand that there will be fear at certain points. It's a natural thing to feel. But what is most important is what you do with that fear and how you handle fear, no matter what's happening. And so it's important to understand what's causing the fear, what's driving the fear, how can you navigate the fear. And certainly what's been helpful for me is to have a group of really supportive and great trusted people around me, a mix of friends, parents, family, mentors that could also provide really great advice and help guide me as I was making really big decisions and taking really big steps. So that's one part that I think is really helpful and really, really important. The other part that I think is the second piece that I want to talk about is just, we talked about life being a squiggly line, and one of the most important pieces that I've talked about in my book is understanding success and achievement. And I think that is so important because oftentimes we believe that success looks like a perfect path. And if we could draw it as a line, it would look like a straight line that goes up and to the right. And the reality is that that is not what success looks like at all. And in fact, if you were to talk to the people that are most successful in the world and they really shared their stories with you, it was not a straight line that went up and to the right. They would tell you that there were really tough times. They would tell you that there were probably times they weren't sure of themselves, or that they had chosen the right path, or that they were going to be able to keep going, or that they would succeed. They would tell you that they made mistakes, and they would tell you that the times they made mistakes were probably some of the most valuable moments in their life because they learned the most from it. And so what I think is important is to understand that you're going to miss the mark sometimes, and the path is not going to be perfect. Sometimes you'll get a little bit off path, or you'll deviate from that path and create a new path altogether. That's all natural and it's all normal. And it doesn't mean that you're not successful. It is a part of life. And what is most important is that you take those moments and those lessons and you figure out how to learn from them and how to keep going, especially when the going gets tough. It is that point where you just can't quit. You've got to decide that you're going to keep going and know that whatever that tough point is, and you're going to have some rough patches, but whatever that is, you can keep going and it will not last forever. You will outlast that tough patch. But the most important thing is that you learn from it and you grow from it, because that learning and that growth and some of the tough parts and what I call the valleys of that squiggly line are going to propel you to the heights and the mountaintops of that squiggly line. So that's another point that I think is really, really important to know. I think the third point that is really, really important and has certainly been part of what I talk to a lot of people about is to understand that you are a unique person. There is no one else who is like you in this entire world. And because of that, that means that you have a certain set of gifts, a certain set of talents. And I believe that we each have gifts and talents that the world needs in some way. And so what becomes important is that you remember that and that you carry that. And that as you figure out and you make your way through your squiggly line, that you figure out how to use those talents and those gifts. And the things that you will have most joy in doing and ultimately likely be the most successful and feel the most fulfilled doing are likely to be things that are using those unique talents and gifts. And what do I mean by talents and gifts? I mean, there are things that come to you so easily that don't come to other people really easily or as naturally. So maybe you can solve certain math equations really quickly, whereas other people are like, wow, how'd you do that? Or maybe you can draw really easily and you do beautiful, amazing drawings. And other people, and certainly me, are like, I can't draw like that. How'd you do that? But often it's going to be those things that to you sometimes you overlook because it's easy and it comes naturally to you, but other people see and they're like, wow, that's amazing. How do you do that? So it's important to know what those things are and to use them and to figure out how to use them. And, you know, ideally the things that you're most passionate and excited about, you're likely going to intersect with that. And so it's important to take that and use that as you go forward and to grow them, because those gifts will evolve as you move forward and you have different experiences. So we've talked about fear and how to navigate fear. We've talked about the fact that life is a squiggly line and how to navigate some of those downturns. And we've talked about the fact that it's important for you to use the natural talents and gifts that you have. So the next thing that I'd like to talk about and really start to close on a bit as far as how I think about life is just that at this point, it's up to you to own your squiggly line. That's what I talk about. And I talk a bit about life being a choose your own adventure, and it really is. And so if you understand and you're able to face fear, and you understand that life isn't perfect, and sometimes it'll be tough, but that's fine and that's natural, and you understand what your unique gifts and talents are, then you can create the life that you want. And you can have a plan and have a vision for it. And you'll know that not everything's going to go 100% according to plan. But what is most important is that you are enjoying what you're doing. Some days it will be hard, but overall, hopefully you're enjoying it. That you feel like you are fulfilled. And to be fulfilled means that there is a level of joy and happiness that you get out of a lot of what you get to do every day. And there's a likelihood that part of what you're doing is helping people, because as human beings, that becomes one of the most important things for us to feel meaning and fulfillment, is how we interact and how we help others in the world. And so it's up to you to take charge of what can be this really beautiful journey and carry it forward. And it doesn't necessarily mean that every day you might do what gets you most excited. I have a very good friend I just talked to today. We were both Duke Business School alums, and she spent a lot of her career in finance, but is also a dancer. And so after business school, wound up going back to the arts and spent some time on Broadway and doing lots of amazing things. So you can have multiple talents, and I believe that we all do, and you can use multiple talents and you can create a life that's a mixture of things. I like to say that life is about an and. There's a lot of focus sometimes on making sure we define ourselves by one thing, but you don't have to be a one thing person. There can be a lot of ands in your story and what you do. So make sure to own that journey, own your squiggly line, be comfortable in the ands, and really utilize everything, every gift that you have in what you're able to do and all that you do. So I'm super excited to stay connected to anybody that would like to talk more about the squiggly line. Certainly my book's available on Amazon if that's helpful. So the book is Life is a Squiggly Line. You can find that. And if it is helpful to get in contact with me, I have a website. It is theofficialfallon.com. I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter. So I look forward to staying connected with you. I hope that you all own the squiggly line going forward. And please don't hesitate to let me know how I can be helpful and supportive to you on your journey. Thanks so much for spending time with me today.